it's great to see sort of progression around the blockchain market and around the application of blockchain into real problems, and actually finding relevant use cases which clients are willing now to invest and use blockchain solutions. I'd love to get your perspectives from your various activities. What are you seeing around that? In terms of blockchain solving a particular problem. So in your cases, Kevin, you've got a specific problem that you're solving. Why don't you start and just give me an explanation of why are they interested? Why are customers interested in this? What's made them change their minds, or what have they seen in terms of the application of blockchain? And we can't see, by the way, your head is quite low.
Sorry. I think it comes down to the whole industry, as I said, the construction industry, the focus was on health and safety. So health and safety was quite important, and it still is. And the shift has been from the health and safety to move to documentation, right? So what type of materials are being installed? Is it the right material that fits the environment? Does it have the performance that it needs? And what we've noticed is more and more owners is you've got a lot of documentation software around, and these documentation is either in PDF or drawing format or whatever form they are, and anyone having access to it can do anything with it. So we've encountered a few problems on site where we were dealing with fire, certain panels being, one of the client being fire rated panels or fire rated cladding. And what we've seen that although there was a certificate that was produced at the time, and when we got hold of the right documentation, it was not the same specification that was specified at the start, and due to commercial reason, something else was installed. So there was no check being done afterwards, because they thought there's a document there that meets the specification, that they've used it. So we found that from that learning that document being tampered with, or not the right document being in the right place, something had to be done for it. So that's the problem that we've been looking at.
So the question I have, and maybe actually, why don't you, and there's a follow-up question I'll ask in a minute, but Gavin, why don't you, same question, give me a view of what's changed. Give me a view.
I'll just say to Kevin, there's probably a claim in there somewhere. That sounds one is breach of contract in failure to specify the right materials, and the other is possibly fraud if they've then covered that up. Anyway, let's put that aside. The lawyer wasn't listening. The lawyer wasn't. I'm seeing an increase in parties wanting to get involved in technology. I know it's quite a general thing to say, but there's a lot of contractors, subcontractors, and specialist contractors, I would say, are increasingly interested in better data. Absolutely. I think we mentioned this yesterday. Do they know what they know? Do they know enough? Are they aware? Are they missing out on opportunities because they've just got this morass of data and nobody knows what to do with it and it's not handled? So yeah, and it sort of comes back to the big data stuff. Do you know what you know? And there's a lot of interest in and around that. And de-papering, I know I use the phrase de-paperization, but digitalizing processes and getting away from little bits of paper flying around the office. Nobody knows where they are. They're on somebody's desk, blah, blah, blah. They've all been lost. And just by way of example, very simple examples. So the last project, I closed the procurement of it's for a data center yesterday, and all the documents have been issued in DocuSign. So they've all been executed electronically, and they'll be held by everybody in electronic form. And for want of a meltdown in Cloudland, they'll all be saved. But that's a big thing, and I think. So that's one thing is big data. The other thing is certainly health and safety remains persistent in everybody's mind. And but I'm not seeing what I would say is enough startups in that space. And I think there's a lot of clever things we can do with technology in that space. And I think, sadly, I think the statistics still run at about 1 death a week on average, just under, I think, in construction, which is all ultimately avoidable, and it's a shocking waste of human life. But the other thing is, everybody's very interested in NFTs, and I know we've been talking about it here. And by and large, people don't really understand what it is. They hear the phrase, they talk about it, but not everybody really is clear about what it is. And you touched on it as well, Alpesh. There's a lot of buzz, not a lot of understanding, and that breeds its own risks, but also opportunity. And if we can get over the legal challenges, and I touched on some of them, then there's a lot that can be done there. But it's slightly torturous as a legal process at the moment, and that sort of puts people off, because I think, oh my God, am I going to run afoul? Is the FCA going to do a morning raid and raid my offices and shut me down? Maybe, if you get it wrong. But that's so those sort of 3 areas, I broadly.
So Kevin, going back to I always ask this question, right? And because I always provocative, is why blockchain for solving the problem? But why not just do it in a normal way that everybody else does? And I'm a technologist, right? I've been a techie for a long time, embarrassingly. And I always ask the why blockchain, and why not just do it in the traditional way?
Well, there's this thing about, when something new comes up, everyone wants to try to have a go at it, right? And you've got all these document share and all these around. And as Gavin was saying, when you get to the legal part of it and how you make the compliance work on that, it's a different issue. Why blockchain is, I think the building that are being procure and build nowadays is for lasting. So most of the critical project, when you're building, the materials being used are long lasting. So it's not for 10, 20, but it's going to be 40, 50 years in the material that has been specified on that project. And so if you're using a normal document share, I haven't put it to the test, or I haven't been to that experience, that will it last that long? And why not blockchain that will, that's moving forward? Perhaps I do think that blockchain is the way forward to retain these amount of data, these documentation around, compared to normal document share.
Okay, so
issues.
I don't mean to push the point, but you haven't actually said why blockchain. So why are you using blockchain for it? I can understand that you talked around it. I get that. Why are you using the block? What characteristics of what blockchain can do are important in the use cases that you're working on?
Well, as we've said, I think in terms of changing or tampering with the document, doing something and going back on it, how many, for someone to go at this level is driven because there's a big constraint within the industry, and margin markup are really pulled down. So any jobs you're involved, there's no money for it, and when it flows down to the bottom of the chain, there's no rescue plan for them. So there are always things that are, option that they take that might not be necessarily the right course of action. So blockchaining will be sorting. I believe it will be resolving that issue.
Cool. Gavin, yeah, I'd love to get your, on my talk, and I think you did as well, talked about the issues around regs and regulation legal. As you're in the legal profession and you do regs, I'd love to get a bit more detail on where you think things are. Obviously nationally, but also internationally, where are there any jurisdictions, as a sort of sub-question, where actually, they're well mature, they've got regs and the legal structures implemented, and because of that, it's going to boom?
That is a good question. Each jurisdiction is taking its own path, let's say, and you touched on DFIC, and peripherally aware of that they are quite progressive there, and they're quite willing to embrace new technology and new possibilities. Singapore, very progressive, certainly in fintech, and increasingly so in proptech, is my understanding. America, always just they're quite happy to push the boat out, particularly in and around California. Perhaps that's not surprising. But some of the projects I mentioned are based in well, presumably in Silicon Valley somewhere, but they're certainly based in California. And Americans, they do seem quite progressive, particularly around real estate at the moment. I don't know whether or not it's genuinely allowed, whether or not it falls afoul of the SEC. And certainly Ripple, I didn't mention it, but it's something I've mentioned before in other talks, is Ripple certainly falling afoul of that at the moment. But there's something of a permissiveness in America generally.
Has there been a softening? Has there been a softening with the CTFC and the SEC around this?
To an extent, I think there is. I think I don't really want to get into talk about Ripple, but it sort of illustrates the point that they're quite willing to let you have a go until you do something they don't like, or they make a mistake, in which case they'll come and have a go at you, rightly or wrongly. And broadly speaking, and this is my own opinion, is I think Ripple are they're not home free, but I think the SEC have shot themselves in the foot sufficiently to not make this work.
It's quite interesting. Ripple have been around since God knows 2015. I've known Ripple since way back.
So 14, 15.
And I've met all of the team in Ripple.
Yeah.
And they've been banging away at this stuff for so long, for 6 years. They've been in trouble with their, Ripple token, kind of crypto, whatever you want to call it, but they've not gone away.
No,
they've not gone away, and they're professionalized. They've found a business model. In fact, they've raised a humongous amount of money to give them another 5 years of experimentation before they actually have to produce any profit. So one of the things I'd love to get, if you guys know, there's a whole suite of projects out there that have got huge amounts of money, with Ether price gone to sky high, like 3,000, whatever it is now. I don't even know what it is, 3,000 something. When these guys did their fundraising in tokens, that the Ether was in the tens of dollars, if not hundreds of dollars. So do you think the fact that they have huge amounts of money, like Ripple, that they're gonna eventually break through? Is it just a question of time, and there will be breakthroughs? Do you think?
I think it's a double-edged sword, and you probably keep an eye on let's say crypto press as much as I do, Alpesh, and it's great fun to read, but you can't trust either case. There's people who are very pro and people are very anti, and some will say, oh, Bitcoin is going to go to 1 million by the end of the year, and others will say, no, it's going to fall over because it's quite clearly a Ponzi scheme. Take from that what you will. Market forces will pull the price up and down. I'm not giving investment advice or any, it's just my opinion, and from what I see in the press, I should be very careful with what I say there. But clearly, crypto platforms, whether or not it becomes money, Bitcoin's not money, etc., but crypto platforms and let's say crypto solutions around NFTs are here to stay. There is so much work and so much investment. It's almost, I don't think it's not quite a too big to fail thing like the banks, but it's that sort of feeling that there is definitely something of value in this space. It's just who and what will capitalize on it, who as in the team, and what it is they're doing in terms of the project. And if we can, we're increasingly digitizing. That's the thing. And it's irrepressible that we will. It's inescapable that we will continue to do.
So I think we have Dennis. Dennis wants to ask a question. Dennis, go ahead.
So my question is about, so what happens to these NFTs if the blockchain network forks? So you have two versions of the same NFT, one in the old chain, one in the new chain.
Are you talking about an NFT for the same object? Or are you talking about digital NFT, specifically on digital art and digital stuff?
Can be any one of them, I suppose. Any sort of NFT. So let's say you have an NFT on the Ethereum network, and the Ethereum network happens to hard fork. Then, you know, so now we end up with two versions of the same NFT, essentially. One on the old chain, one on the new chain. I'm just wondering what the solution to that would be.
Well, there has to be a non-blockchain solution, right? It's going to have to be outside how the blockchain works. There has to be a governance and compliance element to it. So it's like saying, can two same entities issue shares in a particular company? Well, no, because there's a bunch of regulation and law around that. In the NFT space, what is the regulation law? I mean, actually, go on, Gavin, do you, if you have a view on that one like that?
I think you're right, Alpesh. I think there's I think a lot of this is it's not per se a legal question, but it's a technology and data structural question, if I can put it that way. And I think this type of question will probably be solved by interoperability between blockchains. And what you could have, just in terms of architecture, and I'm sure everyone will jump in and say, no, you're wrong, don't be an idiot. But for example, the land registry effectively maintains a database of, well, it does maintain a database of all property segments, let's say, in the country. Now, it's a database. If it's a database, then it's effectively an Excel spreadsheet and a list of fascinating information. Well, that's a DLT, is it not? If you then have it in different places, and well, if you put if you encrypt it, then it's blockchain. So could there be, and I appreciate this is a slight centralization solution, but you could have that as a list, and effectively you're just making, it's not atomic swaps, but you're having conversations between blockchains to verify ownership and do these clever things. But I mean, I don't know how practical that is. I'm not the tech guy in this call, but there's surely fairly simple solutions. And if the law backs that as a solution, I said this is the example I always use is if you're ever in trouble, you're going to have to go and explain this to probably quite an old person in a room. He may or may not be wearing a wig, or she, sorry. But you're going to have to go and explain it to them, and they're going to have to understand what it is that you are going on about when you're talking about NFTs and blockchains and all this kind of stuff. Now, judges, bless them, some are very, very capable, others really not. They are from another world. So you've got to get that message over to them, and that's the benchmark of test, if you like. Will you be able to convince a judge in a court of law that this is the case and that you are right? Cool. That's the acid test in all of this.
Kevin, do you have any views? We're running out of time. I think we're over time by 2-3 minutes, but I'd love to get your final sentiments.
As Kevin said, is how do you convey, how do you get the compliance about it? How do you prove? I think it's more about education, educating the users, educating the whole industry about this revolution, and we need more collaboration between cross parties to buy into that. And I'm sure there's enough papers or enough people working on it to ensure that you've got enough people that are pulling in the same direction. So yeah, I think educating would be the right thing,
Cool. And so I think we're done. I don't know if there's any final comments. I think, on our session, I think we, from my perspective, I think we're seeing momentum. Is, I've been doing this for so long. 7 years is a long time in the blockchain space, and people always say to me, "Oh, it's going to be 10 years before any of this stuff happens," and I'm like, "Yeah, sure, yeah." And I'm not going, you know what? We're 7 years in from when I first heard that, and we're, not there yet, and it might be 10 years. So I'd love to get your any final thoughts on that. What will it take? Is there some specific thing you can say, you know what, we're going to get mass adoption? I thought NFTs and art and collectibles and digital art and collectibles going to happen, but hey, I'd love to get your perspectives. Gavin, the final thoughts?
I think it's very exciting. As a space, is very exciting. And I think I said at the end of my talk is that the law needs to catch up. The beautiful thing about the common law systems in particular is that they're exclusive written. So don't steal stuff, doesn't tell you what you can do. You know, you can go and buy and pay for something. You can, with somebody's permission, borrow something, etc. It doesn't say any of that. It just says don't steal it. So if it doesn't say you can't do it, then you can do it, in which case have a go and try. And that's the beautiful thing about startups, is that they're willing to take that risk, that they might come a cropper later, but right now they're willing to have a go. And that's the thing. But the problems with ownership are, particularly in real estate, are ones of ancient land law. And you know, land law in the UK is about 1,000 years old, from Norman the Conqueror, and I don't joke about that. That's where it stems from. Overturning that is challenging, but not insurmountable. I'll leave it at that. I don't know if that's positive or negative message at all.
30 seconds, Kevin. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I think you said you've been at it 7 years, and you're looking at the 10 years. And in terms of construction and contracting point of view, is we've always had a contract. You have a contract with the parties, and you rely on the contract to work, you know, and you've got the express note of the contract, what is included, what's not included, the specified product, what's not specified. I think it's all about processes. And if we can derive to processes using blockchain and integrating blockchain within the processes, and as I said earlier, educating, I think, you know, we can have a step further. Is how do you bring it that cross parties, you all have that common goal? And is blockchain the right solution for everyone?